Okay, hi, we got a trig function here that we're going to talk about solving for theta on the interval of 0 to 360 degrees. And my function here is the cotangent of x times the cotangent of x plus 3 equals 1. So some problems arise here is that the fact that I'm taking this times this and it says it equals 1. If it equaled 0, that would be great. I could just say cotangent of x equals 0. Cotangent of x plus 3 equals 0, and then I could go through and use the inverse function there to figure out what x was. Problem is that says it equals 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify this side first and see what I create. So when I create this side, I get cotangent squared x plus 3 cotangent of x, and that equals 1. So what I now have here is I've got a quadratic term basically. So the quadratic term, because it's got a power of 2, I need to now set this up as it was equivalent to 0 and then do some factoring if I can. So here we go. Subtract 1 from both sides and you're left with that cotangent squared x plus 3 cotangent of x minus 1 equals 0. Minus 1 from both sides. So now I need to look at is can I factor it? So what are the factors of 1, the leading coefficient here, and the factors of 1 that make positive 3? Well, 1 and negative 1, there are no factors. So I need to look at what are some of my other options. And other options that I have here are, 1, I could do completing the square to figure this out, or I could do the quadratic formula. And in this case, I'm going to choose the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula here, right, is based off of A, B, and C, which is the coefficients of your terms. So I come up here and I go, all right, so instead of saying it's x, remember I have a cotangent of x, so I'm going to say that cotangent of x is equivalent to the opposite of b, which is negative 3, so plus or minus the square root of, well, 3 squared, which is 9, minus 4 times 1 times negative 1, so times 1 is there, times negative 1. So that is all going to be divided by 2 times a, and 2 times 1 here is 2. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and simplify this and talk about what it is of how I can continue on. So this becomes negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, well, 9 plus 4 makes 13. So I got 3 plus or minus the square root of 13. That value all divided by 2. Well, this isn't going to turn out to be anything nice. It's not going to turn out to be any function that I have memorized. So what I can do here is that I can do some estimation. If I can't find out the exact value, then I estimate the value. And the way you do that is literally I'm going to stick this into my calculator, hit enter, take the inverse function of it after I'm done, and from there that's what I'll get my value. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So the way that we do this, okay, is that you go to your calculator and you're going to stick in here the square root of 13. So second, the square root of 13. So 13, hit enter. And that's approximately, I'm just going to round to 2 decimal places. So I get negative 3 plus or minus, approximately, this is 3.61. So now I have 3.61 and I divide it by 2. So cotangent of x right now is approximately negative 3 plus or minus 3.61. So if I go ahead and do that, what I would have here is that I would have cotangent of x is equivalent to negative, so negative 3, so minus is negative 6.61 divided by 2, or cotangent of x, that if I did the negative 3 plus the 3.61, then I would get 0.61 divided by 2. So if I go ahead and take those decimals, you get negative 6.61, divided that by 2, and you get approximately the cotangent of x, so I'm going to bring this up here. You get approximately cotangent of x is equivalent to negative 3.305, and if I were to do the actual division here, so I would get 0.6, so I would get that this is approximately 0.0, so let's just go ahead and do it together, 0.6 divided by 2, and you get 0.305. So what I now have is I have these two values. So what I need to do from here, okay, is I actually need to take the inverse. And remember on your calculator there is no arc cotangent button. So what I need to think about is that the arc cotangent, what kind of inverse function or reciprocal function allows me to take a arc function. So in that case, it's tangent. So remembering back to that cotangent of x is 1 divided by tangent of x. And these two are interchangeable, so I could say the tangent of x is 1 divided by that. And that's actually what I'm going to do. So I'm going to turn this into tangent of x is actually equivalent to 1 divided by negative 3.305 and 1 divided by 0.305. And then what I can do from there is that in my calculator, I can take the inverse, the arctangent of both of these values, and I will get a value. Now you need to remember that these values are going to be in radians, and my interval wants it to be in degrees, so I'm going to talk about how it is that I go back to this. So this is kind of a long, complicated problem. So when I go ahead and do that, if I take the inverse of this, so when I go ahead and take the inverse of that, so inverse tangent of 1 divided by negative 3.305, hit enter, you end up getting that this value here is equivalent to, so I now get x is equivalent to negative 0.29, and I'm just going to round it to 2 decimal places. And then this value, if I take the inverse function of 1 divided by 0.305, so the arctangent of 1 divided by 0.305, hit enter, I get that this is approximately 1.27. So now here's the important thing, is that these values are not degrees. And just because it says the interval is in degrees doesn't mean that it's in degrees. So what I need to do is I need to take this out of radians. And the way you take this out of radians is remembering all the way back to your conversions. So if I take negative 0.29 and I times that by 180 divided by pi, I will get what the degree measure is. And same thing with this one, that if I take the 1.27 and I multiply that value by 180 over pi, then that will give me my angles. So here we go, so negative 0.29, and I'm going to multiply that by pi, or 180, sorry, and divide that value by pi, and you get that this is approximately negative 16.6 degrees, and again, I'm going to round to the nearest tenth. And then for this one here, I'm going to take 1.27, I'm going to times that by 180, so times 180, and then divide that by pi, and what you get here is that this is approximately 72.8 degrees. So what I'm left with here is, well, yes, this is a pretty complicated, drawn-out problem. You just have to make sure you go through the process, and I think that makes this the hardest is the fact that I had to use quadratic formula here for me to go through the process of, looking back at this. So there's a lot of memorization in this one to go through and simplify the problem. And for this one, there wasn't exact, so we had to find the estimation here. So I hope that helps with any work problems that you have to do.